Hello, I'm Kim. I'm going to be sharing with you a small example of a bit of casework I did this morning with a client, and they've given consent for this sharing and the image we created on the Zoom whiteboard. So we externalised the problem straight away as the redundancy, and were able to then refer to this, the problem that had engulfed the client's life as such. And what we were able to do then was refer to that at a distance, and so we had some kind of sense of sitting together looking at the impact of it, and then also what possibilities was it then opening up for the person in quite a conversational way. So after a little while, after about 20 minutes of hearing all the details about how it come as a big shock to the team 10 days ago, and they've all just got a week left before that's it, it's all done and dusted. The client was clearly overwhelmed by the stress of that and the difficulties that everyone was going through. And if you like, in narrative therapy, we often say that, someone's kind of like drowning in the story, that they're engulfed by the story. So through referring to the problem as the redundancy, we were able to come up with an intervention really, and we spent a couple of minutes capturing on the Zoom whiteboard what we've been talking about. So in the middle we have the things that she couldn't control, she had no influence over, and then in the outside the things that she had influence over. And I do this with children as young as 7 or 8. So any age, these circles of influence can be used. And we'd spent a bit of time also looking at how you do create a cover letter and maybe get a support letter from the agency. And we'd done a bit of coaching around that next step to put the new CV together with all the new skills of the past work in the workplace. And they then said, well, they've got influence over how they feel about life and the thoughts around this, and how they could enhance their thoughts, their helpful thoughts, and their actions, taking care of my body. So what had happened was they'd brought up the story, and I'd said, well, it sounds like there's been some of the stages of grief here. And I'd gone to the low mood, which they'd mentioned, and they said, well, also anger, and so each was validated. But one of the things the low mood had created was a kind of a disinterest in really getting motivated, and a feeling of quite a low affect. And, through this conversation, just naming those things, they were able to say, well, actually, I can take actions to take care of my body as I normally do. And we went into quite a discussion about some of the well-being practices this person has, which I had no idea of. And then the conversation about the next step of the career was even broadened beyond their imagination. So that was really exciting. So in other words, from this, difficult problem that they were gripped by, the conversation opened, and the problem actually revealed some possibilities that they hadn't dreamt of. And so what happened was they began to share. In fact, they'd gone from seeing this as completely problem saturated. They'd begun to have some clarity of direction. She said she felt safe with the uncertainty just from that session. And we talked about, well, how does that happen? How do you suddenly feel safe? And it was discussed that the connection that we have as the client and the counsellor, it's a trusted connection that we have. And when they talked about how the things that they'd written down that they can control are the goals, I am a little bit cautious of that word goals, because it can be a lot of pressure to have, like, you've got to be onto them, and you can't fail them and all that. So I said, well, maybe each of those things that you had, things like taking action, taking care of your body, what if we pictured those as stepping stones or paving stones in the path towards where you're going? Because you don't actually know exactly where you're going yet, but already you've got these beautiful, already made skills and dreams and hopes. So we use that metaphor of paving the next part of the journey. And then I concluded by telling a little therapeutic story, which I'll share with you. It's sometimes referred to as God's shop, and it's quite a well-known story. But I felt it was appropriate because, as I said, the goals often are presented like a fruit that you've got to achieve, whereas the things she was talking about were more tentative. And so I told this story. Once upon a time, a woman went to the marketplace where she went every week with her basket. And what did she see but a new stall? She went inside. But who should be behind the counter but the creator being? She looked in amazement and then looked around the shop and said, "What are you selling here?" And they said, "Anything your heart's desire." And she said, "Well, please, could I have peace of mind, love and happiness, freedom from fear, and not just for me, but for my children, in fact, for everybody on earth?" And the creator being smiled and leant down a little bit and said, "I'm sorry, my dear, I don't sell fruits. I just sell the seeds." I hope you can take away something from this little mini tutorial today, and I appreciate the person consenting to the sharing.